Good afternoon. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all around the world who have signed up for today's webinar about the role of farmers fighting food losses across the African continent. This is the second webinar in our global series on reducing food loss and waste. My name is Esben Lunde Larsen. I'm a fellow at the World Resources Institute and at Champions 12.3. And I will be your moderator for this second webinar in a series focusing on how we can deliver on the UN Sustainable Development Goal 12.3 about halving food loss and waste in 2030. The webinars will all be recorded and will be available at the Champions 12.3 website. We have three distinguished speakers today who each have 8 minutes to enlighten us before we open for a Q&A session where you have the opportunity to be heard. You can write questions during the three interventions and then our panelists will provide answers afterwards. But let me introduce our participants. Theo de Jager, President of the World Farmers Organizations. Lindiwe Sibanda, Co-Chair of the Global Alliance for Climate Smart Agriculture and working at the University of Pretoria, where she is the Director for African Research Universities Alliance, Center of Excellence in Sustainable Food Systems, and Sofia Ahmed, Lead for FOLU Africa. Without further ado, I will give the floor to Theo de Jager.
Much, Esben. Food loss and waste is very often associated with the richer countries. And in many of the debates we've had, the global discussions on food loss and waste over the last few years, references more often than not made to the value chains in the global north, as if there is no problem in the poorer countries in the global south. This, of course, is not true. Food loss and waste does not occur simply because there's too much food or because there's food in abundance. We need a fresh look at the food loss and also the waste part in the value chains amongst smallholders on the African continent. And thank you so much for this opportunity which you have granted me to air the voice of those farmers in deep rural Africa. You see, there is a desperate lack of downstream value chains on the continent. There's a lack of post-storage capacity. There is very little of a cold chain from farm gate to consumers' plates. And then the linkages to the markets is simply not of the kind that favor the better utilization of food that leaves farm gates. And there are basically three main leaks. There's three places in the value chain where this food loss and waste on a primary basis occurs. First of all, of course, it's on farm. There's a lot of losses on farm. On the one hand, because of this lack of proper post-harvest storage, and also because smallholder farmers do not have the modern techniques of protecting their crops, whether it be from insects or from weather or so. We estimate that the problem with on-farm losses is probably the highest in Africa south of the Sahara. Must also remember that what you harvest from a field is never all perfect. Nature does not create only perfect fruit and veggies and whatever the food is we want to send to the harvest. Elsewhere in the world, usually the second grade and the third grade foodstuffs go to processing. But in Africa, we have very little value adding in processing plants. it is not there. So that part of the harvest is lost. And then, of course, the logistics from the farm gate to where the nearest market is. Once you take vulnerable fruits, veggies, livestock, across the kind of roads which we have in the deep rural areas where the farmers conduct their business, there is damage because of the quality of the infrastructure. And as soon as there is damage, there's loss and there is waste. So in the logistics between the farm gate and the market already, we suffer losses. It's not only because of dirt roads, it's also because of the kind of transport that is used. I recently visited Zambia and I will go there again in a month from now. And it is incredible how much fruit and veggies and even meat is transported by bicycle. Now this fruit and veggies, this produce, this meat gets to a market where it competes with imported stuff. And you can imagine what the chances are that the market would favor the local produce. Hence, on the market already, you also have some loss and some waste. But how much exactly? We don't know. There's a golden rule on every farm, no matter how big or small. If you cannot measure, you cannot manage. We are struggling to manage this issue because we have not really started to measure it. Well, we have made a small start in one sense. Both me and my dear colleague, Lindiwe Sibanda, are part of the Vanderpan team, where we have launched this program to try to measure by creating what we call, in farmers' terms, a digital dustbin, where at the point of food going to waste, we want to lock it onto a platform. And anyone who can use it for whatever other function in a circular economy, whether it can go for the homeless, for food kitchens, or if it is beyond that use, when it can go for animal feed, or even compost, or even biodigesters, the uptake can meet the provision there. The question, the demand side and the offer can meet each other on a digital platform. But more important than that, we can actually measure how much is going to waste and where in the value chain does that happen. Because when you know, you can really do something about it. And of all the challenges I have listed now, there's one flag that flies across that. We need investment. The solution to food loss and waste on the African continent lies in proper investment. We need the investment in the downstream value chain, in the post-harvest storage, in the cold chain, in the processing plants, in setting up the infrastructure. One can say, shouldn't the farmers do that? Isn't that what cooperatives are tailor-made for? Of course, there are business opportunities in this for farmers too, but the farmers cannot tar the roads. The farmers cannot build the bridges. It is not only a farmer's issue. It should start with governments creating a policy environment which is attractive for investors to put their money in there. And when you lure investors, you must create certainty for them. This is government's job. There's much said about the circular economy, but you know, no matter how you draw the circle, a part of that circle will always touch on the land. The circle turns through the farm, always. If you want to make compost, that's where it will be made. You want to use it for animal feed, that's where it will happen. The farm is that connection point of two ends that make any line a circle. Without the farm, there's no such a thing as circular economy. And then, if I can close with this, the issue of managing food waste and loss starts with raising awareness from the consumer side through the rest of the value chain, of course in the logistics and of course on the markets, in the shelves and shops. But most importantly, we need a fresh look at raising the awareness amongst the producers themselves. And for that, we need an effort. We cannot just sit on a platform like this one we have today and think it will happen out there. Managing food loss and waste is not a wagon of which you can turn off the brake and it will run. It's like a wheelbarrow. You need to pick it up and push it. And if there's not somebody who pushes it, it will stand where it is. So my call is for a partnership in raising that kind of awareness and creating the will to manage food loss and waste on the continent. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Theo. And we will move on to Lindiwe, but before I give the floor to you, I'll just remind our participants that you can ask questions in the chat, so you're very welcome to do that while listening to the speakers. Lindiwe, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Espen. Thanks to Theo for sharing passionately what he knows best, which is commercial farming. He's not only a farmer, but a champion globally for all other farmers, as he has been a renowned leader for World Farmers Organization. I retired from a day job to follow my passion, which is farming, and it's been a tough experience. The first 3 years were disaster because I walked straight into the peak of the drought here in Zimbabwe. After cyclones, long spells of dry season, for a rain-fed farming system, it's tough. It was tough not just for us in Zimbabwe, but the whole Southern Africa region faced an amazing drought in the past 5-6 years. The link between the drought and climate change is as clear as day and night to most people. This year, we've had abundant rains, the first of its kind in 7 years. Zimbabwe is heading for a bumper harvest. However, the sad thing is that we are currently at harvest stage, and I've been able to witness face to face how much loss we are experiencing as a result of manual labor at the harvesting farms, the storage facilities that are makeshift and just prepared overnight just to host the grain, the pest infestation that's likely to enjoy the harvest before this is processed, and the poor transportation and the poor cold chain. I want to put this up front because this is happening live in most countries in Africa at the moment. But what we are not appreciating, what our policymakers are not appreciating, is that this loss in food has a very close link to climate change. It's been said that globally, if food waste could be represented as its own country, it would be the 3rd largest greenhouse gas emitter behind China and the United States. The resources that we need to produce the food that becomes lost or wasted has a carbon footprint of about 3.3 billion tons of carbon dioxide. These are the hidden figures that we don't bring to the face of our policymakers so that they can invest in climate smart agriculture technologies and reduce the farm losses and the food waste. According to FAO, 30% of the food that we produce for human consumption is lost and wasted along the supply chain. And this is something that's happening every year. This is almost 1.3 billion metric tons of food that does not even reach the consumer. Some reports have even estimated this to be as high as 1.6 billion people every year who could be fed from the food that we are wasting. Sadly, these losses are even higher in Africa. And this has a negative effect on food security, but also on climate change. In Africa, the losses can be between 30 and 50%, and these are happening mainly downstream from production to retail, and they are even up to 50% when it comes to fruits and vegetables. This is sad because these losses are happening mainly at the farm gate, where farmers are then unable to feed themselves, but also not to do the core job that they are supposed to be doing, which is feeding the nation and feeding the world. Now, under the Champions 12.3 initiative, we are looking at targeting, measuring, and acting. I just want to unpack those three in the African context. In terms of targeting, we are all clear. We've set ourselves the target under Sustainable Development Goal 12.3 to reduce food loss and waste by at least 50%. But we cannot do that if we do not benchmark where we are. So the issue of measurement is critical. Measurement of what we are producing, measurement of what is being lost, will then allow us to act. And it is on that acting that we need to be accompanied. First, we need to be able to develop the right metrics of measurement on farm. Unfortunately, for most of our farmers, the measurement component is still not well applied. But I want to spend more time on the third component, which is what then should we do to reduce these losses, farm losses that are contributing to climate change. First, we need to be using improved harvesting, processing, and storage techniques on farm. We are not able to do it even for our dry foods. It's even worse for the wet products. Cold chains are not available because of the high cost of refrigeration, and we have not invested in renewable energies enough to be able to install cold chains at farm level at affordable level. What is required is really to position ourselves that initiatives and programs that target harvesting, the processing and storage, and that we can scale it up maybe through our nationally determined contributions and related national processes, so that our policymakers can put this in the policy development plans as a priority, just like they've prioritized the green revolution of doing more. But more important, we are talking about doing more for less, and there's no better way of doing more for less than reducing the losses that are occurring on farm. We also need to make low cost and easily replicable technologies available, which would be affordable for the farmers so that they can at least have a way of mechanizing the way they do business. The collection of the harvest, a combine harvester cannot go into a 1 hectare farm and do justice. So we need these farming brigades that can hire out equipment at affordable rates for farmers to mechanize their business. It's not for every small farmer to own equipment, but there's got to be well-calibrated policies that allow access to mechanization and efficiency of production. And that will go a long way in reducing the losses, but more important, creating employment for the youth who could be the entrepreneurs that run these farming brigades and equipment that is hired out to farmers. Another component that is critical in reducing these farm losses is the issue of early warning systems and information management. Africa is the continent with the highest number of cell phones, mobile phones per capita. It would be so great if farmers could access information, weather-related information and market-related information. Then that way they would know when to harvest so as to reduce the losses that are as a result of the vagaries of weather. They would know when to transport their produce to the market so that it is not wasted because of low sales. But they will also be able to share information and receive technological interventions and advice through their mobile phones. My third component in terms of reducing waste is awareness campaigns. We need to start early. Let's make sure that education on food loss and its relationship to climate change is shared at high school level, primary school, in our farming unions, so that people don't only just think of drought, but they also know that they are contributing as an emitter from the farming practices. So let's share the education by organizing awareness campaigns at schools and in the farming organizations. My fourth and final point is really about helping farmers to measure. This is one area whereby if these measurements were done and farmers were able to calculate the loss, just the economic loss, that would be a great incentive for them to acquire new technologies for them to ensure that these food losses are reduced on farm. Because currently it is almost like it's business as usual. This is what they are used to, and there is no other way of reducing these losses. So a clarion call for our government and policymakers is, can we make sure that farmers have the technologies for reducing post-harvest losses? Investing in cold chains, investing in hermetically sealable bags that reduce the pest, investing in infrastructure on farm that will preserve the produce, but most important in the transport and market arena, where farmers need to be able to access good services, good facilities that will then reduce the food loss and ensure that the produce gets to the market in good quality. Because whatever gets to the market in bad shape, it's usually rejected, thrown away, and that's a big loss to our farmers. I just want to end up by saying investing in reducing food loss should be escalated to the same level as we've talked about the relationship between drought and climate change. So we are contributing to climate change by not reducing food losses, particularly the waste at farm level. What we need are investments, what we need are policies, and what we need are technologies to make sure that farmers can reduce on-farm waste. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lindiwe. And I will now give the floor to Sofia. But Sofia, maybe you could introduce the Food and Land Use Coalition just as a starting point and then move on to your intervention. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ispen. My name is Sofia Ahmed. I'm coordinating the food and land use work in Ethiopia and across Africa. We have a couple of countries that we are going to be starting to expand Food and Land Use Coalition. So the Food and Land Use Coalition is a global initiative in which I'm leading the first one in Ethiopia from Africa. We have around deep dive countries, Indonesia, Colombia, China, and India. From Africa, it is Ethiopia, the first deep dive countries, but we have also follow Sub-Saharan Africa, which is now started to work a couple of years ago in Kenya, in Ghana. We are expanding in DRC, in multiple other African countries. So having said this, let me directly go to our today's business. Great to be with all of you today to discuss on the farmers' role in fighting food losses in Africa. So while I was preparing for this talk, I was reminded of a model farmer that I met a couple of years ago at World Food Prizes. She was talking, making a recommendation to world leaders what they need to take in mind while they are making, important decisions on food and agriculture. Most of her talks was focusing on, the investment needed in helping farmers in fighting pre and post-harvest losses. So I was amazed while preparing for this talk. This is critically important for farmers. She even tried to convince them that if this kind of investment is happening in her village, they would be not only a national food hero, they could even be a global food hero. This really underlines the importance of supporting farmers in fighting food losses in Africa. So I will be covering similar issues. What would be the role of the government? But the previous speakers also very well outlined what should be the role of the government. And in our context in Ethiopia and across Africa, the role of government is very indispensable. They play a very critical role because we have a very large government. We are still an infant state in terms of bringing private sector in most of the sectors that we are in. So the role of the government is particularly useful in this context in facilitating action and driving action in creating collaboration with diverse actors. The previous speakers mentioned about leadership. The government should be playing storage facilities, all those stuff. So I am more focusing now the government to take a leadership role in terms of creating enabling environment, in terms of policies, solutions, and supporting institutions and creating favorable investment climates, fostering partnership in the alliances, and supporting innovative products and processes that we have just mentioned a couple of innovative solutions like cold chain facilities. So again, government should also play a bigger role in facilitating public-private partnership in those kind of alliances. I also believe that the government should also invest much in improving transportation. We have even farmers who travel 5 hours a day to sell their products. 2.5 hours to go to the market and 2.5 hours to come back to their home. So it is very difficult for them to be able to sell their products. So investment in our infrastructure is critically important. I would like to also emphasize the need of innovative financing, unlocking access to finance, which is critically important to be able for those farmers to be able to invest in innovative technologies like cold storages, sometimes also facilitating low or no return investment is critically important. That should be the role of the government. The previous speakers also mentioned that the government should be able to establish organized formal marketing center linking farmers to portable market, which is critically important. For me, I think the support should be case, location, in situation specific. The combination of this kind of intervention can speed up change in reducing food losses. I will now focus more on a couple of examples from Ethiopia, how we trying to be part of the solution at Food and Land Use Coalition. We started in Ethiopia, as I said. So a lot of innovation is happening. We all agree that globally there is a lot of innovation. Particularly, we want to focus on successful examples from Africa, innovative source of funding that have greater potential in strengthening storage and distribution capacity. For this to happen, we have supported and facilitated several conversations between the Ethiopian government and the arch marketing partners that invest in developing energy efficient and cold storage technology in Ethiopia. So now they are in a process of establishing the first cold chain facility in Ethiopia. Similarly, we have more planned for this year and next year to organize investment roundtables to attract additional public-private partnership to advance the scale up of this kind of affordable post-harvest technologies in Ethiopia. In parallel, also, we have also started to formalize partnership with the Ministry of Agriculture to jointly identify a set of action required to systematically measure food losses of agricultural commodities, which is already identified, prioritized to commercialize Ethiopian agriculture. So we are in a process of doing that. We believe that this is critically important to inject change at national level. In addition to that, our partners, GAIN Ethiopia, over the couple of years also has been working to reduce post-harvest loss of potato by introducing a reusable plastic crickets, which resulted in reducing point of losses by 5 to 10% compared to wooden crates. So this is some of the examples that we are doing in Ethiopia to inject and introduce changes in this space, which I believe is small but incremental as we go. By way of conclusion, I would like to say farmers have a greater role to play, and we need to support them because they make sure that we all have enough food in our plate every single day, despite of all the challenges that we discussed earlier that they are facing. But without action, change is very difficult, and we all need to be part of the action. In that way, it would be possible for us to progress to achieve SDG goals, Malibu Declaration, or Paris Agreement that all African countries are signatories. That's all for me, and thank you very much. I look forward for the conversation. Over to you, Espen.
Thank you so much, Sophie, Sofia, and thank you to all three for great enlightenments on this topic. We have received a lot of questions in the chat, but before going to those, I wanted to ask you each individually a question. And Theo, I would like to ask with you, you touch upon the whole notion of the role of governments and creating attractive investment environments. I could ask, why don't they do it? Or if they do, what is needed more? Because every government would be interested in having investment in their country, not least in the food chain, since that's a major part of the economy across the African continent. Theo.
There's a saying that capital is as shy as a deer. When you scare it, it runs. And this is very true for investment in rural Africa. The kind of infrastructure, post-harvest facilities, which we've had so much discussion already today about, it requires capital from somewhere. And the capital does not come because the environment does not have enough certainty to carry the risk. And that certainty must come from government policies. There must be a relationship of trust between private sector investors and governments. Capital will go where it can grow, and where it is underfed, it will flee. Now, why wouldn't governments invest in that? I think there are three answers to this question. First of all, we today live on an urbanized continent. Africa is no longer the continent where people live in the rural spaces. Our cities have grown bigger and bigger and became younger and younger. And farmers got older and older, and the average age of farmers today is way above 60. So the notion that we must lure more youngsters into farming goes hand in hand with how much infrastructure there is, how far it would be from schools, what kind of connectivity would you have in these rural spaces. Infrastructure is not only about roads or rail, it's also about being able to reach somebody by telephone. having an internet connection these days. So the rural constituencies, the rural vote seems to become less important to the politicians who are trying to lure the vote. But secondly, the number of people benefiting from a new road, or the number of farmers benefiting from a processing plant, is probably too small. They are staring themselves blind in the numbers when it comes to contribution to GDP. In a country like my own, in South Africa, although agriculture's contribution is only 2.5%, the food chain contributes 21%. And the rest of the chain, whether it would be agricultural bankers or input providers or agricultural processors, up to waiters in restaurants, they would not have been there if it was not for the 2.5 contribution from farms, the origin of the food. And I think the third reason is probably because we sit with a generation of policymakers in Africa who no longer come from farms. A generation ago, everybody still had linkages to the deep rural spaces and to farms. We all had an uncle or a grandpa who came from a farm. It's no longer the case. There's the connection between the producer and the consumer got broken. And for the same reason, the connection between the farmer and the policymakers also got broken.
Thank you, Theo. Lindiwe, I come from a Danish farm family, and the cooperatives in Denmark has for sure made Danish farming one of the strongest in the world, also on technology use. We didn't own all our machineries. We had some we shared with neighbors, and you touch upon this aspect about having technology and access to it. Could you maybe give us a short answer to why is it the cooperative model seems to be weak at the African continent when it has been such a success other places in the world? And maybe what is to be done if we aren't able to use that model?
Thank you. Very interesting. Unfortunately, for the majority, particularly the family farms, cooperatives were associated with social movements, and social movements were about poverty and not connected to economic gain. But what we learned and saw from large-scale commercial farmers was that they formed cooperatives where they worked along the whole supply chain, and they were able to then work as big groups who would then take advantage of size to get inputs at lower costs, to service each other within the cooperative, where others were producing seed, others were producing transport, others. So it was a business cooperative, not a social-oriented cooperative. So the answer is clear. We've seen it work, so we need to reignite a working model. And I think we have an excellent opportunity with the youth, whereby we have a lot of youth that are unemployed, we have a lot of educated youth, we have a lot of youth that are wanting to get into food systems, into agriculture chain. And I think this is an excellent model of getting them to form the cooperatives and creating financial stimulus for them, but also a working model. And I think the mechanical agenda, the farm mechanization agenda and the youth would be a very good template for springboarding the new cooperatives which have an economic base.
Thank you so much, Lindiwe. Sophie, I'll ask you a question and then we'll move to the questions from the audience. So you represent an organization built on science and knowledge, and we know that one of the big issues is really the knowledge spread and implementation of knowledge and new technology. What is the aim or the advice you want to give when it comes to reaching out to smallholder farmers with new research and innovation and technology?
Yeah, as you know, the smallholder farmers are, because of the experience they have, they might not be in a position to take risk when it comes to new technologies and innovations. I was trying to address in my speech that this should be the role of the government in terms of, initiating a partnership and finding innovative way of solution, innovative way of financing this kind of technologies so that farmers would be able to take risks. So creating partnership between private sectors, between philanthropies, and we'll be able to bring this kind of technologies. And we will make sure that also as well, finding innovative innovative financing in this kind of what we are promoting. So these are the things that we should do in terms of encouraging smaller farmers to take a risk in new technologies.
Thank you so much. The first question from the chat is to you, Lindiwe, and that's about the role food banking can play in eliminating food loss in Africa. What role do you see and can partnerships with food banks create initial solutions to compensate farmers while getting access to food to those in need?
Thank you, Esben. My experience with food banks, the banks have visited the food banking model in the US, was that it's really about saving on food waste, whereby food that is about to expire, that is on the supermarket shelves, is then taken to a group where, poor people can buy at very low prices or be given for free. But coming to our model in Africa, there's a great opportunity for that concept. We used to have what we call Zunderemambo, whereby at a village level, the headman or the chief for that village would have a field which is communally plowed, processed, harvested for poor people in the community. But as everybody is gone solo now, that has disappeared. It's one man for himself. So we need to go back to these models that we're helping in terms of collating available resources, making sure that there is a safety net for those who cannot afford or access food. So yes, indeed, the food bank model is an excellent model that needs to be customized. And partly what Theo mentioned as the FunPan initiative on the dustbin is really to track where is the food sitting, where should it go, and how best can we access it before it goes bad. So all these are initiatives that require investment so that we can pilot them, and when they adapt them to local conditions, then we take them to scale. So yes, thumbs up for the food bank model. Let's pilot it out. Thumbs up for the dustbin, digitalized dustbin by FunPan Group. Let's invest and scale it up.
Thank you so much. Sophie, cold chain storage was central to your remarks. Do we have good quality data on losses within ag products that could be solved by cold storage? This is a very important topic, as these ag products are also the most nutrient dense products.
Yeah, for us is we particularly focusing in the very beginning to do a kind of background information gathering on what should be the intervention in Ethiopia when it comes to food losses. So we particularly focusing on because there is high vegetable, fruits and dairy products losses. So those are the areas that we are encouraging, including the government, are encouraging for them to intervene in this specific value chains. They particularly interested as well in pharmaceutical companies, because we don't have cold storage in Ethiopia in that areas as well, but we encourage them to introduce this cold chain in areas where there are where there is a big loss in vegetables, fruits, and dairy products, which will able to contribute to food security in the country, as well as job creation in many other achievements that you are planning to have. So we are directing them to that direction.
Thank you so much. Theo, you mentioned the challenges with on-farm losses in your speech, and also mentioned the lack of using plant protection products and so on. If African farmers get access to these means that had been used in the global north for decades, how do we secure that we don't end up in really a bad environmental situation like we have seen in many countries in the global north, where the use of plant protection means and nitrate and so on really weren't done with a great concern?
It's not that much different from the gun debate, which is of course very very high on the agenda here in Southern Africa. The problem is not the gun, it's the guy who pulls the trigger. The problem in crop protection is not necessarily the chemical, it is the farmer that applies it. We have an opportunity in Africa to do it right from the start, because we start off from a very low basis. It is as important as it is not to give a loaded gun to somebody who has not been trained on how to use it. So important it is not to give chemical fertilizers and pesticides and herbicides to farmers who have not been properly trained on how to use it. If we do not go that route, we will always have a large part of our crops with damage on it, whether it is insect damage or whether it is because of weeds and this kind of stuff. What we need in Africa is to fight poverty. This is the biggest enemy on the continent. The challenge, the war of our generation, sorry, is a war on poverty. And there's only one way to win that war. That is by creating more wealth. And no sector of our economy is better positioned to do that in a shorter space of time and on a broader basis than agriculture can. We have everything that money cannot buy: the wonderful soils, the climate, the people, the water. What we lack are things which money can buy, which you can bring about through investment. But if we want to do it through agriculture, we need these three things. We must modernize our agricultural system. We must mechanize it. We must get away from the hand hoe, and we must commercialize it. Farming must become a business, not just a way of life.
Thank you so much. Lindiwe, I wanted to ask you if it's realistic in terms of the SDG 12.3 target, what can be achieved in Africa in terms of reducing food loss? What is your estimate on that?
I'm an optimist. I want to believe that the target we have set at 50% reduction can be achieved. However, we need the investment, and I cannot say it any better than what Theo has said, that unless we start at the farm, where the food that we seek to reduce losses on, and we modernize the farming in Africa. Number two, we mechanize, because that's where we invest in infrastructure, and we commercialize. By commercializing, it means farmers will be able to access loans, and they will be willing to pay back. So they're not asking for handouts. Farmers will have access to technology, and it should be affordable technology. And on capital, it should be patient, long-term capital, because farming is for the long haul. You don't get your returns overnight. So I think the framework for reducing food loss and waste is the same as for improving food security, because it's about investing in farming, investing in technology, and availing the capital. Thank you. So we can achieve the 50% loss reductions.
And building on that, Lindiwe, when we look around globally, we can see that we have some countries that spearhead this agenda, both on the food loss as a general debate, but also on food production and efficiency in food production. If you look at the African continent and just mention 2 or 3 model countries, who has found the good solutions to these challenges that we are discussing? Who can we look to as the spearheads? If you should mention 2 or 3 countries.
I'm always pushed to handpick the cherries, and my response is always Africa is 54 countries. So if you were to say in your own country, it will be a country. But when you're looking at a whole continent of 54, you have the diversity of policies, diversity of investment plans. But I think what we should be looking at is what our own governments have set as the parameters for success. Let's look at the 10% investment in agriculture, where you're saying, what is the intention budget-wise? What is government's thinking? Is agriculture a priority? So there we can lift countries that have put in more than 10%. And for the first time, my own country, Zimbabwe, has put in more than 10%. And the results for this year's harvest are testimony that you need to do that. Traditionally, we've always had Ghana's done it, Malawi has done it. And it's all about a good policy framework and setting measures, benchmarking, and making sure you deliver on the promise. So let's make sure that the priority allocation of the budget to agriculture is good, but let's make sure that that money is directed at modernizing, commercializing, and mechanizing, and making our agriculture climate smart. Most countries are on the path, and I believe there will be a top 10 list at the very near future.
Great, thank you so much for that. Sophia.
May I also take a bite at that apple, please?
Say that again, Theo.
May I also add to what Lindiwe just said, please?
Yeah.
And it's a very interesting question, and having really visited the largest part of Africa over the last 5 years, I want to add to those list of countries, Botswana really went to lengths to strengthen their young farmers. I envy Botswana for the number of young farmers who have chosen this as a career and who are hell-bound to make a success out of it. And even though it is one of the driest countries on the continent, but also Zambia, it's really propelled. And if a fairy would land on my shoulder and give me one wish for the future of this kind of challenge on how we deal with the challenge of food loss and waste, I would wish for government investment in research and development. If you do not stay on the cutting edge of new technologies, you will fall behind. And once you're behind, it's very hard to catch up, because as soon as you have caught up, the rest is in front again. We need more R&D on post-harvest management.
Yeah. Thank you, Theo. And since we can easily imagine you playing a lead role in a fairy tale, we hope that a fairy will land on your shoulder on that wish. Moving on to you, Sophie. Should farmers be better connected for collaboration? And if so, how could that be achieved?
Yeah, thank you, Espen. I think it's critically important for farmers to organize. A lot of studies, a lot of research has been done. The difference between, when farmers are allowed to collaborate, get organized, and able to make changes. Particularly when we give them the opportunity, even if they are organized when they have independence. For example, if we take certain African countries, particularly Ethiopia, we have farmers organization, which is particularly managed or controlled by the government. So it is critically important making sure that we believe that they have to be organized, at the same time making their independence, giving them the space to act upon what they really want to achieve. So it is critically important they get organized, but giving them the space, the independence, the necessary support they needed, what we have discussed today, including access to innovative financing, infrastructure, technology accesses, innovative mechanism of accessing ICT mechanisms, all those things. So, but I really support that farmers need to be organized in a way that makes them their voice to be heard.
Thank you so much. Theo, in regards to the role or the opportunity for agro-business in supporting farmers with minimizing losses, what do you see as key there? We have touched upon this, we have talked about governments, the farmers themselves, but the agro-business, what is their opportunity or role in supporting farmers with minimizing losses?
If you would have asked me this question a mere 6-7 years ago, the answer would have been different. I've changed my mind on this issue. I always thought that farmers will go where the agribusinesses are, that farmers would go where there are banks to access financing, and that they would go where the seed and the fertilizer and the mechanization companies are, or where there's a market nearby. I've discovered it's the other way around. Agribusiness would go where the farmers are, because that is their market. And when it comes to food loss and waste, I think it's a massive mistake to think that agribusiness is going to pave the way for us. Agribusiness will most probably follow where the farmers took the lead. There's no bank I know will at this stage in 2021, after the COVID pandemic, well, it's not yet after, but given the impact of the COVID pandemic, will now raise their hands and say, let's invest in better management of our post-harvest value chain. I think when farmers start to do it and there's money to be made and it becomes profitable, the banks will go there, the insurers will go there, and the agribusinesses will go there.
Thank you so much. And that was the last answer to a vast amount of fantastic good questions from you in the audience. Thank you to all the panelists, to the participants, and to our great team at World Resources Institute, Gillian, Emily, and Molly, who did all the work behind the scene so we all could enjoy this conversation. We will answer questions that we did not have enough time to answer today. The recording will be available at the Champions 12.3 website, where you also can access a lot of resources around food loss and food waste. So please stay tuned for the next food loss and waste events later this year. And from the World Resources Institute and Champions 12.3, we wish you all the best until next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.